Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Got a Case of Wanderlust podcast. Today I'm speaking with Shieh, known for her travel brand, The Sensible Fay online. Ji is a Taiwanese American passionate about mindful living, slow travel, outdoor adventures, and sustainable fashion, who alternates between New York City and Taiwan for her home base. I cannot wait to dive into this travel conversation with Ji and learn all about her adventures all over the world. So, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here and to chat a little bit more about travel.
I'm so excited and grateful to have you here as well. So, I always like to start out with this one question, which is what sparked your wanderlust?
Okay, so as stupid as it sounds, I'm gonna have to say Instagram. I think yeah, looking at the photos on the feed back in the day, at least like this is what initially started my inspiration to travel. And then once I actually got out the door and began traveling, it kind of shifted towards just curiosity and learning more about each individual country, location, destination, place, and the people and the culture there. But like, first and foremost, it was the photos. I think it just like sparked my inspo as to like how big the world is and how different it can be. And then actually being able to experience it and witness it kind of moved my journey on from there.
This is such a good point, I feel like, a good supporting argument for the positive aspects of social media, which are so not talked about. We're always bashing social media. So I'm so glad that your inspiration literally is due to social media. That's really cool. Did you take your first solo trip inspiration from Instagram as well?
Um, I I don't know if I would like I don't know the first solo trip was specifically from Instagram. I think it was just like the idea of living abroad was sparked by Instagram, the whole like digital nomad movement before I like dove in and realized how toxic it was. But back when it was just like an idea, that kind of prompted me on the journey. But in terms of traveling to Italy, which was my first solo trip, I think it was more just like, I don't know, kind of on a whim. Just like I saw that flights from Italy to New York were really cheap, and I was on my way back from New York to Taiwan. So I was like, okay, let me just stop in Europe on the way. And it just like randomly took off from there.
Ah, okay. So it was like en route to somewhere else, Italy.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, on your blog, Italy is one of the four countries that you have extensive, amazing articles full of jam packed information about. And the other countries would be Vietnam, Taiwan, and Thailand. Out of these four countries, which would you say has had the biggest impact on you?
I think it would probably be tied between Italy and Vietnam. Italy because it was my first solo trip abroad, and so like the whole experience was completely new, and I felt like I learned a lot about myself and my travel style there. And then Vietnam because it just like completely blew me away, and it was something that I didn't expect. Like I thought that Vietnam would be really beautiful in terms of culture and nature, but it was yeah, it was just there's so much to it, and like so much familiarity, and yet so many differences. And I felt like I learned a lot about my own identity through that trip.
Hmm, that's beautiful. And how long did you spend in each of these places?
Oh, a month each.
A month
Yeah,
each.
it just
Okay.
like pans out that way.
Okay. And is that a comfortable amount of time for you, or do you wish you would have stayed longer?
I definitely think that I'm gonna revisit those countries again in the future. I mean, there's only so much you can do in a month, but I do feel like it was a good amount for a first time visit for
Okay.
both of those countries.
And I would love for you to share some of your insights from these trips. There's a wealth of information, as I mentioned, on your travel blog, but for those who haven't checked you out yet, can you just give some tips maybe? Let's start with Vietnam for travelers going for the first time.
Oh, I think the first thing is you have to do your visa, especially as an American, like U.S. citizen. I think we get so used to our passport privilege that like a lot of people forget that there are a lot of countries where we still have to apply for visa, and it's very much like a norm everywhere else. to apply for a visa, and so like make sure you get that done. I think the majority of countries have to apply, but it's a pretty streamlined effort. So just Google it, pretty easy. And then another thing from that is that Vietnam is a very long and skinny country. So number one, you're gonna spend a lot of time on transportation. Like those overnight sleeper buses, definitely a thing. And then also number two, because it expands, like because the country stretches over so many different like climate zones, you have to be really smart about how you packed. Because I visited in winter and then I was like, oh, Vietnam, Southeast Asia, it's gonna be warm. And it was so cold. Yeah, so definitely do your research and like pack for different climate zones depending on where you're visiting.
Okay. And as far as things you wish you would have known before, is there anything that you wish you would have done or didn't do?
I think I wish I spent more time in like some of the off the beaten path destinations. Like for the most part, I visited just like the big cities and like the places where everybody goes their first time, like Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, um, Hajang, whatever it is. But I think like there's so much in the little villages and like in the more remote areas that I wish I had like thought about spending time in those areas. But then another thing about Vietnam is that it's a little bit challenging to get around, and like some of those areas are not as accessible. So I think that was just a barrier.
Okay. Accessible, you mean via public bus or train?
Yeah, I think there are plenty of buses that go around. It's just a matter of like doing the research. And I think like surprisingly there's a good amount of English content around Vietnam, but like even so like navigating the local transport systems, sometimes like language barrier can get in the way. So it just takes a little bit more effort.
Right. Local transport is always super fun to navigate, especially especially if you're solo traveling, you have no one else to help you out.
Yeah, I mean, thank goodness we have like internet data and Google Translate now. I can't imagine how people would have done it like 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, I would be so lost. Google Maps is like my BFF when I'm traveling.
Truly.
So, did you take one of those sleeper buses? I'm curious. I've heard those where they don't stop for bathroom breaks even.
Yeah, I don't know. My experience on them was pretty good. Honestly, I think for the most part, I took a few flights around Vietnam and then also mostly traveled by sleeper bus. And there may or may not have been a ferry or two. Um, yeah, but I don't know. I felt like I had a pretty decent transportation experience on them. The drivers are a little insane, and there's a honking culture in Vietnam in terms of like driving, because like yeah, the motorbikes. That's kind of like how they let each other know. Um, so it can be a little bit loud, but I feel like I had a pretty good time on them. Like
Okay.
most of them took bathroom breaks, and then the speeding wasn't that much of an issue. So yeah, it was surprisingly decent, and like the VIP ones were pretty good.
Okay, that's good to hear because I did recall seeing on Instagram someone who posted be on a bus and there were no bathroom breaks. And that is
Oh my
like
gosh.
so scary for me because I like to stay hydrated.
Yeah, for sure. I have a friend who like bathroom breaks were a concern too, because she like has been on some medication and stuff, and so like we had to definitely like make sure to plan for that just in case. But like thankfully they did take bathroom breaks, so yeah, it worked out.
Okay. Whew. And then how would you say Thailand compares to Vietnam? Because both Southeast Asia, but both very different countries, obviously. So how was your experience
Mhm.
in Thailand in comparison?
Um, I honestly liked Vietnam more, but that's only because I felt like Thailand, like their tourism industry has been around for a while, and so like I feel like there are a lot of like institutions and measures in place in terms of like what the typical tourist routes are, and so like everything is very commercial in my opinion. So it feels like everything's like prepackaged and they have like these set recommendations. And of course you can talk to locals and explore a little bit more, but Thailand is also a huge country. So like I also only spent 1 month there. So I was pretty much basically just limited again to like the main areas, like the main first time visit areas.
Hmm.
So yeah, I felt like it was a little bit more commercial. And I don't know if it's okay to say this, but there were definitely more like creepy white old men. So like that was definitely like a negative part of like the sex tourism aspect, was a pretty negative part of my experience. But like the locals were really great. Like most of the travelers that I met were really great. It was just like a slight edge of harassment at times, depending on where I went.
Oh, wow, that's surprising. I'd never heard that about Thailand. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. I definitely can personally relate. As a solo female traveler, it seems like you often attract like unwanted attention, often from white old men.
Yeah, it's definitely like it definitely took me off guard as well. But it might also just be because of like the areas that I visited. So, I think that is also part of the conversation too, potentially.
Okay. And if you had to recommend some cities to visit, I know you mentioned some in Vietnam, but also for Thailand, which cities would you recommend, like as a must visit city, and maybe some cities that you could skip?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, Bangkok. Personally, it wasn't my favorite. But I think, like, as someone who grew up in New York, I have an appreciation for fast-paced things, and that's something that I've been missing a lot in Taiwan. And like the second I landed in Bangkok, and then like we were driving our way into the city, it was just like expansive. It was just like lights and lights and lights and buildings and buildings and buildings. And I was like, wow, this is like people say that New York is a city that never sleeps, but Bangkok is truly like a lot bigger. And I feel like a lot more active, especially at night. Um, yeah, so Bangkok first, just because there's so much to explore and I feel like you'll never run out of things to do. And then I really enjoyed Pai. It's like a small little town in the northern region. It kind of has like a yoga hippie vibe, which do with that as you will. But I felt like it was really cute to be out in the countryside and like I stayed in this little, sorry, motorbike. I stayed in this little like cabin, I guess, like your little situation. And it was kind of just like camping out in the fields with like roosters and cows, and it was just really adorable. So Pai, and then I did my open water scuba training in Thailand, so Koh Tao.
Ooh.
Koh Tao? Yeah, Koh Tao. Yeah, so a little bit further south. Um, it wasn't my favorite island, but I think like if you're going to do any sort of like diving and training, like that's a good base to work out of. Yeah.
Okay, that's super cool. I know on your Instagram you say I forget the exact word, but it's like a lover of water. Do you know the word I'm talking about?
A thalassophile.
Yes. How do you say it?
Thalassophile?
With a P?
Thalassophile. Like
Uh,
Thal.
the Lossophile.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I remember seeing that word before, but never knew how to pronounce it. But I deeply connect with that word too. So, yeah, speaking of water and the ocean, which place or city or even country do you think has the best beaches?
Thailand.
Okay.
Of the places that I've been, yeah, I think definitely Thailand. But the sun will get you, so make sure you sunscreen up.
Okay. Of course. You gotta protect your skin. We're not trying to age. We're not trying to get skin cancer.
For sure.
And then let's move on to Taiwan. As someone who's Taiwanese American, do you feel like you deeply connected with the culture on like another level than other places, or do you think that like it was still just very foreign to you?
I think so. I like visited a few times growing up, and so it was never super foreign. Um, yeah, I think the culture was always like somewhat familiar, but I think now that I've been here for a little while longer, I'm starting to learn deeper aspects of it. So I think like on this like the superficial level, there's stuff that I already knew and felt comfortable with. And on the deeper level, there's there are like some nuances that I was never aware of before.
Hmm.
So yeah, kind of like both.
What were some of the surprising aspects in Taiwan?
In my brain, Taiwan was always like a very safe, happy, and yeah, a safe and happy place. And like in many ways, it is still like a safe haven for me. And I feel very secure here. But I think like I'm starting to notice the little things that like would irk somebody.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like it's inevitable when you move somewhere. You can't always hold on to your idealistic version of a place you
Mhm.
had as a tourist or when you first visited. Um,
Yeah, I think. Mhm.
yeah. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, no. I just said, yeah, like for better or for worse. Like, I think there's a lot of beauty in learning the little things, but then it's also like, I wish I didn't have to take these roast tinted glasses off in some
Hmm.
ways. Yeah, but I think one thing that did take me off guard was, uh, again, sorry, identity politics.
Hmm.
And we're gonna touch on that a little bit, but in Vietnam, just like it was really interesting to navigate my identity as an American and also like someone who is Han Chinese in ethnicity, given like their relationship with both countries. So I think
Hmm.
like that was an interesting like shock that I didn't expect to encounter. Yeah.
So is there kind of like different treatment because you're not ethnically Vietnamese and you're just like clearly a different
Um,
race?
I don't think so. Like I don't think it was outright treatment, but I think it was definitely like a point in a conversation thing, like a point of I don't know, like there was some sort of like attitude where it was like, oh, like where are you from? And then it was like, oh, I'm from Taiwan. And then sometimes it would be like, oh, so like Chinese, and I'm like, but Taiwanese, but I don't know. It was it was kind of strange to navigate. Yeah, a little bit.
Hmm.
Because it was like some people were really like open and fond towards like American slash Taiwan people, and then some people were like not super clear about any differences, and so they felt hostile as well because of like, especially in northern Vietnam, like their history with wars against China. So like there was some sort of like tension there, and like a lot of it was unspoken because like language barriers, and also like the people that I was talking to were like tour guides or like people that I was just meeting in passing, and so there wasn't like an appropriate time to really dive into these conversations. And plus I feel like yeah, it's just not as talked about in other cultures outside of the US.
Hmm. Hmm, that's really interesting. That's always something that's on my mind when I travel. Like, how are these people perceiving me based off where I come from, what I look like, even though there might not be any relation, to
Mm,
like my personality and where I come from, but people
yeah.
still see it as they perceive it. So, yeah, something to be mindful of definitely when you travel is people might not have the friendliest reactions, but it's not like anything personal. It's just kind of
Hmm.
just how they were taught and societal norms and whatnot. Do you have any recommendations for places or experiences to do in Taiwan?
I really love the East Coast. Um, like Hualien and Taitung, and then like the little islands off the main island of Taiwan. So like there's Orchid Island or Lanyu, and then also Green Island or Lüdao. But yeah, I really like the East Coast because I'm very much like a nature girly. And like so the thing with Taiwan is like the West Coast is basically like a lot of the cities, like a lot of I don't know. I think it's like 70 or 80% of the population is on the West Coast or something, and then like the rest is like kind of scattered throughout. So like the infrastructure is a lot better there, and then it's just like a lot more convenient to travel. But I feel like the nature on the east side is just unmatched. Yeah.
Hmm, okay, so visit the east side.
Yeah. I mean, both sides are like great to check out, but I think the east side is a little bit underrated just because it's a little harder to get to. But if you have time, definitely check it out.
Okay, noted. And overall, how has your traveling style changed since when you first began solo traveling and until now?
Yeah, I think I've definitely slowed down a lot. So like in the beginning, I definitely like would look up like blogs and things to do and just add them all to my itinerary and then try to check every single one off. Versus now, I'm very much like more selective about the places that I go and like the amount of time that I spend there and like whether or not I actually have the energy to visit. So I think like just being more cognizant of like where I am in my travel experience and like understanding my own preferences a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. Slow travel is definitely a way to be more responsible too when we travel because we're more, like you said, conscious, mindful of the decisions we make. We're more selective. We're like we may not prioritize the super touristy places that already have so many visitors. We might selectively choose places that are less touristy, but may fit our preferences better. So, how
Mhm.
in what other ways do you incorporate like these slow travel practices into your itinerary planning and stuff?
Yeah, I think mostly just making sure to buy local as much as I can or like stay in local places as much as I can. Um, yeah, I also like love to cook when I'm traveling. So like typically I'll book a place that does have like that ability. So yeah, just like looking up different areas and different places to stay that give back to the community and like the people that live there. So I think that's one way.
Hmm. Yeah, not only does it allow you to be more like eco-friendly, but it also allows you to experience more of the place, experience more sights, and possibly encounter more people and have interactions along the way. So that's a really good tip. How
Yeah.
does your passion for sustainable fashion play into your travels, if at all? Do they tie together at all?
Mm, I think only like tangentially, mostly because like when you travel for extended periods of time, you can only bring like a small amount of garments. And so it's like you find yourself being really selective about what you buy and what you bring. And then if you're constantly moving from place to place, like the last thing you want to do is lug all your clothes around. Um, so yeah, I think yeah, I honestly it only ties in through the fact that like I don't shop very much when I travel, which is a good thing and a bad thing, I guess. Yeah, like it's bad because I'm not really giving back to the local community. I will buy like food products usually. So like I'll buy local and eat at restaurants and then like any souvenirs that I buy will typically be like I don't know, let's say like Vietnam has really good coffee, so I'll buy like coffee beans to bring back to my family. But I don't really buy like any other like trinkets or clothes. Um, yeah, so like on that end, I'm a little bit more sustainable because I don't really shop. Yeah.
I mean, I love the idea of the like you call it the no shopping month or something, no buy month you have on your Instagram,
Yeah.
kind of where you don't
Mm-hmm.
buy anything for the whole month except for essentials, of course. So I love that idea because it allows you again to be more mindful of how we live, and also just to consider where we consume things and the origins. Um,
Yeah.
how do you research your brands about where to shop? Like how do we make sure brands and the places we buy from are actually sustainable?
I think there's a really great directory called Good on You, and that's like definitely a default for when I'm lazy, because they do a lot of like the research and filtering behind you, and then they have a rating system, and so it makes things very like skimmable. But like beyond that, looking deeper into like the brand, their website, whether or not they have their sustainability metrics posted, like their plans, their guides, their sources, basically a lot of places won't have their factories and things listed. And so like that's definitely a challenge, but you can always email them and ask to see or like ask to learn a little bit more. And I found that like a lot of brands are actually pretty responsive, especially if they do care. So
Hmm.
yeah, just taking that time to do a little bit more research on your own.
And where did this passion come from? Because it's a huge part of not only your Instagram feed, but you also write about it extensively on your blog. So, do you know what sparked this motivation?
Um, I don't know. It's been so long, but I think a lot of it was in like wanting to do what little I could to make an impact on that front. Um, Yeah, and I feel like sustainability in general is like a huge, huge, huge conversation, and sometimes it can be really disempowering. So like focusing in on like one little area and like, oh, okay, right now I can focus on sustainable fashion, and now that it's pretty much routine for me, like I don't buy fast fashion, I don't really shop clothing very much. Now I can focus on another aspect of sustainability that I care about, like plastic, for example. So I think for me, it was just like out of wanting to feel like I could do something, and that like fashion was the most like accessible and easy to tackle head on. Like thrifting or swapping or like even mending your own clothes, like those are all more sustainable than buying from sustainable brands. So like yeah, like it's important to support small brands, but also like we have a production issue where it's like we're just producing too much already. So like if you can buy secondhand, like that's definitely like the most accessible and affordable route, and like mostly how I approach it now.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it's so easy to do, especially in the US. I don't know about Taiwan. Is thrift shopping their thing?
It is. It's getting bigger. I think like initially a lot of it came from like Japan, just because like history of colonialization and like also like Japanese culture was really big in Taiwan for the longest time, like the early 2000s and stuff. And so like their secondhand vintage culture kind of like trickled over as well. And then now it's just like a big sustainability conversation in general. So I definitely feel like thrifting has grown drastically here, which is like really exciting to see.
Okay. I would love to thrift in Taiwan. I feel like the sizes will be a lot better. I know when I was in South
Yeah.
Korea, the only really Asian country I've solo traveled to, like it was so nice to shop because everything was like in my size versus in the US it's usually a bit too big because
Yeah,
I'm a petite girl.
I feel that. It's like, oh, all the pants are too long. What do I do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, going back to the conversation about sustainability and travel, do you have like any, mm, I guess, observations about what are the top unsustainable things people are doing when they travel, and how do we kind of shift our behavior to be more ethical and responsible?
I think, oh, that's a challenging one. I feel like maybe it's more in the mindset than like physical things that they're doing, because I feel like if you approach a place that you're visiting as just like a destination or like a place to check off, or like these are the things that I want to see and that's all there is to this place, then like I feel like that's going to trickle down into like how you treat the locals there and like how you treat the environment and the infrastructure and the customs. So like I feel like just like knowing that this place exists outside of the context of your travels is like the first and most important part. Yeah, but then in terms of like practical things, mm, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like everything about like sustainable living kind of just like trickles into like sustainable travel as well. So like as much as you can do to like limit waste or whatever it is, like do that when you're traveling as well. And like of course it's not going to always be accessible because we can't possibly plan for everything. But just being a little bit more mindful about the impact that you bring to a place.
Yeah, 100%. And we've kind of talked about this on earlier episodes, kind of having this bucket list mentality, treating destinations
Mm,
as like literally things to consume for your own entertainment,
mm,
and not really thinking about the impacts you have as a traveler and what you leave after you go back home. And so I think it's really important, everything you just said about just being more mindful, just kind of thinking about your actions before you invest in something, before you partake in a certain experience. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And my last question before we jump into the rapid fire round is we're talking a lot about kind of essentially capitalism. How can we kind of get around this consumerist mindset? So, do you think traveling is like more of a subversive or supportive thing to capitalism?
That's pretty challenging. I feel like traveling, I don't know, it just like it opens our minds a little bit more. And so, like in terms of capitalism, can you like, are you talking about like consumer mentality and like disposable mentality?
Kind of like everything that's capitalism, how it shapes our
Mm,
societies, from consumerism, but also to the hustle culture and productivity
yeah.
mindsets.
Yeah, I think kind of like it presents a different alternative. Like the more you travel, the more you see how other people live. And because we live in a global age, like everything is touched by capitalism, but there are like countries where it's not nearly as like all encompassing as it is in the US. And so like I think the more you travel, the more you see alternatives and possibilities. And I think that kind of like helps to break down the system a little bit more,
Hmm.
hopefully, in my mind. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, it could kind of go both ways, I think, depending on how you
Mm.
travel. Let's move into our rapid fire. So, the first one is, what is a special place in your heart?
um, well, Taiwan, obviously. um, yeah, but I think Lanyu, which is like I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but it's a small, tiny island off the main island of Taiwan, and it's just like it's like a 2.5 hour boat ride, so it's a little bit far to get to, but it's just like just the most beautiful place, and it's also home to the indigenous Dao people, Dao indigenous group. Um, yeah, and so I don't know. There's just something so magical about that place. Yeah.
Wow. I've never heard of that place, but I will make sure to read all about it on your blog for when I do go.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Okay, and then next question is what is a memorable meal you've had when traveling?
Mm, pasta in Italy. I am not a big carb pasta girly. I love bread, but like pasta is not my favorite.
Okay.
But it was just like I
I'm team
had this
bread too, by the
meal.
way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, two bread. I mean, they got great bread too, but yeah, I was in Capri and then they had just like incredible seafood pasta. Yeah, it was just like the noodle was like the perfect texture and like the seafood was so fresh and it was a massive bowl, plate, whatever. Yeah, and I think that was just like really impactful. It's like,
Mm,
wow, food is so fresh and so tasty, and I did not imagine it.
okay. See, I have to explore more of Italy. I've only visited Milan, and
Oh, you
I kind of
have
laughed when I
to.
saw on your one of your posts. I'm telling you, I was stalking your whole website before this.
Oh my
One of the
gosh.
posts was like under or like overrated cities in Italy, and one of them was Milan. I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
because
Milana's
there's just so much to
sorry.
Italy, so much beauty and cultural richness, and Milan just lacks that.
Yeah, 10/10 agree.
Lastly, what is a dream destination for you?
Oh, I don't know. This is a rough one. Anywhere with the ocean, honestly.
Hmm.
Yeah, I've been really getting into freediving. So I would love to revisit Tulum, even though that's cenotes and not the ocean. But Yeah, I didn't know how to free dive back then, so I'd love to like revisit and actually dive deeper. But other than that, in terms of beach, Albania is on my list to visit this year, so I guess that counts as a dream destination.
Okay, I've heard very good things about Albania. It's kind of like, it's still underrated. Not many people know about it compared to other places.
Yeah, so fingers crossed that I get to see that and like explore it early. Because I feel like in terms of all these other places that I visited, I'm like late on the bandwagon. Like everybody's been here, done that, and I would love to see some more of like a country that is less known.
Yeah, I totally feel you. It's like, it's silly, but I don't know if like I'm trying to like analyze why we love places when it's like more to ourselves versus if there's huge
Mm.
crowds, because it's like, I don't know, like visiting the Eiffel Tower alone versus when you're with a crowd of people, it just like hits different if you're alone. Even though it's the same thing, like same environment, same circumstances, it's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely, it just feels a little bit more special for some reason.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope you get to visit Albania as well pretty soon. Well, thank you so much again for your time. I really, really enjoyed our chats, and I'll make sure to put all the links in the show notes. But yeah, I wish you the absolute best with all your future travels.
Ah, thank you so much for having me, and same with you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Got a Case of Wanderlust podcast. Again, my name is Lydia, and you can find me on social media in the About section of this podcast. Please rate and review if you found value or insight from this, and I hope to see you in the next episode.